Well, welcome back as we're talking about the history of neurofeedback, and in particular, the history of our generation for direct neurofeedback. So here's kind of how it lays out. I showed you some of the devices that are common today and useful today, and useful when they're kind of put together. But let me give you a little bit of the history lesson. So we talked about alpha theta work of Gene Peniston and others at the Menninger Foundation, and where it's really useful, it's not just about, hey, I can meditate like a guru. It was found to be very, very effective and very, very helpful in the treatment of certain kinds of addictions. So alcoholism and so on, drug issues, and also things like PTSD. So the thinking was that people who had perhaps a dopamine deficiency or an A2 receptor site dopamine quirk or whatever it might be, that they made less alpha brainwave activity naturally. So if we can train people to make more alpha activity when they want to, or theta activity, slow brainwave activity, when they want to, then they can make the alcohol obsolete. And it worked. And not only did it work as a treatment for most kinds of alcoholism, not all, but many, it made a lot of people who were alcoholics sick whenever they drank alcohol. So that was kind of an interesting side effect to it. So the alpha theta work, as we talked about in the previous video, was a long time ago, very powerful, but the technology they had wasn't nearly as good as it is today, but it was good work. Then Barry Sturman, as we mentioned in the last video, he's working with the cats. So this is how Barry Sturman's story plays out. Now here's the rest of the story. So out at Edwards Air Force Base, which was near where we used to live in Tehachapi, there were many, many years ago now some problems on the flight line where some of the people working out at the flight line at the air base were having seizures and getting really, really sick, and they knew there was some toxin out there at the base. They just didn't know, which drum of stuff that should never have been there was causing the problems. So they asked the VA, and they knew of Sturman's work with cats. They asked him to buy some more cats. So he got a whole bunch of cats. And they said, okay, here's the toxins. Now, administer them to cats. Let's find out which toxin causes seizures, and then we'll know what to make sure we get off the flight line. So Sturman did that, and one particular chemical exposed to all the cats, and cats had seizures, and they died from this chemical, except the cats that had been trained with the brainwave 12 hertz training. They just looked at each other. They were unaffected, had no seizures, did not die. So Sturman looked at that, kind of filed that away, and said, I wonder if we can take this learning technology called brainwave biofeedback, I wonder if we can teach humans with epilepsy to not have seizures. And he could. So that was another branch. Sturman in Los Angeles and Peniston and his team in the Midwest, that was just a whole nother branch for this brainwave biofeedback. So Sturman's doing his work in Los Angeles, and he is successfully teaching people how to not have seizures, how to control their seizure disorders. And again, very crude technology, as all these guys had. I mean, they're making these boxes in their garage to try to, give feedback to people about making a particular brainwave. Inhibiting slow brain waves, making more of other frequencies. So there's a man named Siegfried Othmer, his wife Susan. Siegfried was like a physics professor somewhere, Cornell or something back east. Susan was a nurse. They had a son, Brian, who had a seizure disorder. And so many years ago, they learned about Sturman, and they said, would you work with our son? And he said, sure, be glad to. So they flew out to LA, and sure enough, Brian learned how to not have seizures. And it was such an amazing thing. Siegfried and Susan said, hey, we're in. This is really something. And as a physicist, Siegfried understood both how to display waveforms, frequencies, and what they were. I mean, he understood what was going across the screen with the different EEG scrolling. See, he got it. He understood all the information that was on the little squiggly line going by. And Susan, being a nurse, was right there with him. So they packed up and they came to the LA area, and they were in the San Fernando Valley for years. And Siegfried and Susan did some really smart stuff with Sturman, including like they hired video game designers, such as it was back in the day of Pong and Pac-Man, to make the feedback that, hey, you're doing just what we want you to do in the form of video games. So we're playing Pac-Man with them and making boxes bigger and smaller and things like that. And for the time, it was really, really interesting. So the way I got into it, this must be 30-something years ago. I've been licensed more than 35 years, and as a mental health professional, I got my doctorate in psychology a lot of years ago, 35-something years ago. And I was in private practice, and then I was hired by a psychiatric hospital to come and run half of the hospital. The adolescent program, chemical dependency program, and adolescent psychiatric program. I started a children's program. We had a diagnostic center. I built quite a kingdom there. And then I ran a CHAD group. It was a support group for parents of ADD kids. ADD in my private practice was my niche. It was my area of expertise. So at this one particular CHAD meeting, I gave my speech. I talked about whatever it was I talked about that day, medications or whatever. And there were about 120 parents in the room. And I just asked if there were any questions. And this one lady stood up. I really liked her. Her son was one of my clients, and I liked the family, and she was really nice. And she says, Doug, what do you think about this treatment for ADHD that was on TV last night coming out of Los Angeles called brainwave biofeedback, EEG biofeedback? So in front of all of these people, I said, it doesn't work. And she asked me, how do you know it doesn't work? And I said, because I know everything there is to know about the treatment of ADHD, and I don't know anything about that, so it doesn't work. Yeah, I actually said that in front of God and over 100 people. And she was so cool. She changed my professional career. She says, Doug, we love you, but your ignorance of a subject does not make you an expert in that subject. And I said, you're right. I'm an idiot. So the next day I called Siegfried Othmer, the guy who had been on TV out of Los Angeles. And I said, hey, I told him my sad story. And I said, can you help me out here? And he said, yes, Doug, you're an idiot. Why don't you come on down for lunch? Come down Saturday. Let's have lunch together. So I drove down to LA, and I met with Siegfried and Susan, and they talked to me about the world of brainwave biofeedback and the treatment of ADHD and other kinds of disorders, anxiety disorders and depression and migraine headaches and even more serious things. So then they invited me to a training a week later, and I was in there with 200 other MDs, PhDs. It was wild. It was amazing. So I started then in the world of traditional EEG biofeedback. And as time went on, what I learned was that about 70% of my clients improved no matter what the diagnosis was. They just got better. And it could be ADHD, anxiety, depression, seizure disorders, chronic pain, migraine headaches, just a whole variety of things, about 70%. And also, but it would take about 40 sessions to accomplish the treatment goals. And the sessions would be 45 minutes to an hour long. So it was a big investment on the part of the family to say, okay, I'm trusting you that, if we do this 20, 30, 40 sessions, this is going to work. Because the first 20 sessions, you wouldn't see much of a difference. So there we were, using old school traditional neurofeedback. It worked. It just took a lot of time. So I was at a conference in Palm Springs, a neurofeedback conference, and went to a breakout session with a man named Len Ochs. Dr. Ochs was working on this marriage between traditional neurofeedback and traditional neurofeedback technology, the amplifiers and so on, and the sound and light machines that I had talked about in the last video. He married them together because he wanted to know what would happen if we could get stimulation for the brain, entrainment of the brain, that was driven by the person's own brainwave activity. And to avoid a seizure, there would be a slight offset. So if the dominant brainwave was, let's say, 6 hertz, the feedback might come back at 8 or 10 or 15 or 20 hertz. But it followed along with the person's own brainwave activity. So it was an interesting idea, and he was looking for people to help him collect data for the FDA because he really believed it worked. He was working a lot with people with chronic pain, fibromyalgia, and anxiety disorders. That was sort of the things that he saw that responded really quickly. So I asked if I could be part of the team, and there I was. So in my practice in Bakersfield at the time then, I had by that time I had 2 traditional neurofeedback systems and a Flexyx, a direct neurofeedback system, as they were known back in the day, Flexyx. So with the Flexyx system, as I said earlier, you had these sunglasses that had little LEDs that would flicker in them, and again, driven by the person's own brainwaves. And so we were, like blasting them with light. You have your eyes closed, you get this light show driven by your own brainwaves. And then Len called one day and he says, and we got great results. And Len says, hey, turn down the lights all the way because less is more. Okay, less is more. So we turned the lights down all the way. Wasn't a great light show, but people made dramatic changes really fast. So then he called one day and he says, get about 1 inch of electrical tape and put an 1 inch strip over each of the lights. So the light's just indirect because less is more. Go, okay, got the same results. Then he said, put a piece of cardboard and tape it over the light so just the photons go through because less is more. I said, okay, did that, got the same results. Then he said, all right, now with the cardboard on it, put it on the table in front of the client, have them close their eyes because less is more. And I said, I'm not doing that because that looks silly and I'm just not doing it. But he was working with a man's wife for fibromyalgia who was really well-to-do, and he said, Len, I don't know what's happening, but obviously something really good is happening because I see it every time you treat my wife. It's making a huge difference in her life. But I just don't think it has anything to do with these glasses that are laying on the table with cardboard wrapped around them. So the man funded Len Ochs to actually take the system to the Livermore Labs in Northern California where Len lived and say, find out why this thing works. What's going on with this? So it turns out it wasn't the lights at all. So they could cut off the lights, throw them in the trash. It was the cable, little insulated wire, little teeny tiny insulated wire coming from the amplifier. It was a special two-way amplifier. Had to acquire brainwaves and then send the signal back, a pulse back, signal back to the glasses. It was the wire, insulated wire, that was coming over the person's shoulder into the glasses. The brain was picking that up. This little subtle bit of energy, the brain was responding to that. And so then for years, Len and others who were using his system could just lay the wire over people's shoulders and they would improve. It was amazing. So that generation of direct neurofeedback is moving forward. And then now this fourth generation of neurofeedback has we put 2 electrodes on the forehead, we put little things, reference wires on the earlobe, put a ground wire at the back of the neck or on the earlobe, and we both acquire the brainwave activity and send the signal back through the same electrodes to the brain, a really teeny, tiny signal that challenges the brain adjusts to it, the brain heals from it. It's really powerful. So along came Len Ochs. Now Len had a software writer, Corey Snook, and Corey is still out there writing software for different direct neurofeedback systems. Our software writer is Bob Grove, and did a beautiful job with this high-tech system. So those are the software writers, Corey Snook and Bob Grove. David Dubin is our medical director. David's a medical doctor. He was an emergency room physician for a number of years. Left the practice of medicine to do the direct neurofeedback because he saw that in many or most cases it was more effective than the medications he could prescribe. So he got into the field of direct neurofeedback. He was for quite a long time Len Ochs' medical director. And now he's our medical director. He has a private practice in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, and has sort of the rights to the black box that you have, that special two-way amplifier. It is his license. So everybody who does this kind of neurofeedback, we all get our systems from Dr. Dubin, just one source. Same software, it might be white labeled, but it's the same hardware, same. The big differences are going to be how we apply the technology. So some people make it real sciencey and really complicated the way they apply the technology, and other people, we've worked really, really hard to make it as simple as possible to apply the technology to a client. Barry Bruder is a great guy. He owns IASIS, microcurrent neurofeedback. Barry at one time required treatment, came to David Dubin. Dubin helped him with a Len Ochs system, and then we went up to meet with Len Ochs, and Len Ochs helped him with his system, and Barry said, "This is so amazing, I want to do this." So Barry is in the field with IASIS, microcurrent neurofeedback. There's a new man, Gregory Gillespie. He's been around for a year or two with Neurogen brain balancing system. A lot of YouTube videos, you'll see him there. He was a veteran, served the country proudly. I mean, wonderful. That's wonderful. PTSD stuff and the direct neurofeedback helped him so much with that. He said, I want to do this. So he's started his company. Fred Willis, you'll come across that name perhaps, High Performance Neurofeedback, HPN. So Fred's a former NFL player, retired NFL player. And a lot of the work that he has done and still does is with retired NFL players. So that's you'll see that, high performance neurofeedback. And then we're calm waves. And calm waves, brain performance. So calm waves is, I was in the field for quite a long time. I took a hiatus from the neurofeedback universe and went into ministry for a number of years, and then back into private practice with neurofeedback more than a dozen years ago now. And that's where I connected with Len Ochs, and I connected with David Dubin, and David, because for a number of reasons, became my mentor, and I bought his system, and we've just been good friends for a number of years. So I have been doing the direct neurofeedback in a private practice setting for that period of time now, right? Before it was the Flexyx system, Len Ochs' system, and traditional neurofeedback with Siegfried and Susan Offmer. And then the last dozen years, we've done some traditional neurofeedback, but probably 90% has been the direct neurofeedback, because clinically it does everything you want done. Just it does it, and it does it fast. The sessions are about half as long as traditional neurofeedback, and it takes half as many sessions to reach your treatment goals. So I would just do direct neurofeedback in my practice. And then a couple of years ago, my sons wanted to know if I'd be interested in coming out to Scottsdale, Arizona, and work with professional athletes and business executives out here. So Susie and I made the move about a couple of years ago, and have been doing private practice work, but then we started selling the systems to other providers. So mental health centers, drug treatment programs, some residential treatment facilities, people in private practice. Lots of people, even a sheriff's department with a SWAT team that wants to use it. So that's what we've been doing as of late, is Calm Waves has evolved into really a medical sales company where we put together the technology in a synergistic way, so that practitioners, drug treatment programs, now even university football programs, athletic departments, that we can be really results focused by using these really powerful technologies. And we're real excited about that. So that kind of gives you the context for what it is that we're about in Calm Waves, what direct neurofeedback is. Now, I'm going to go into a lot more detail about how direct neurofeedback works and how it's maybe different than traditional neurofeedback. Those will be in following videos. But for now, at least we've got the history of neurofeedback sort of covered.